suppose we could start in a little bit here. A seasonal Bible study. Again, I didn't pick the order for these, but talking about the topic of Santa Claus. And before we get into this, maybe I'm going to share a few things with you, at least from my experience. I'm going to try to tie into the lesson. Where I used to serve in southwest Minnesota, I served in what was known as, at least for that part of the state of Minnesota, was known as the heart of Christian Reformed country. A lot of Christian Reformed churches, you get to, in these small towns on Sunday, everything was shut down. Like, no businesses open because and farmers, if you had these Christian Reformed farmers, if you're doing any type of field work or anything in the field on Sunday, you're sinning. This is the Sabbath. All of this, a lot of pressure on outward living, outward custom, and the like. And so I had a couple of members that weren't Christian in each one of my churches that weren't Christian Reformed, but when we would do things in church, or usually when things came up in Bible study, or we had different activities that would come up at church, usually one of the things that, in the mission congregation, had one, and this lady used to be a Lutheran elementary school teacher, and we were going to do the trunk or treat. And she came up to me and she said, "Pastor, I don't think we should do that." And I said, "Why?" And she says, "Well, she says, the Christian Reformed around here are all against Halloween and against practicing that." She says, "I'm worried about what they're going to say about us with that." She says, "I don't think we should do it." And I said to her, "Why are you worried about that?" She said, "Well, it just casts our church in a bad light." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Is this the only problem that the Christian Reformed people would have with our church?" "Well, no." And I said to her, "I respect where you're coming from, but I said, I'm really not concerned what they think about our church because the majority of those people aren't going to step foot in here, aren't even going to consider becoming a member here." And I said, "They belong to a church, we're not going to go after them anyway." I'm not concerned what they say about us because they're saying stuff about everything that we do. And I said, and she says, "Well, this is," I go, and I said, "I respectfully disagree with you." Well, she chose not to participate with that. And I respect her for that. And it was also it had one in the other congregation that was like that with that. And then also when we come to Christmas, and then usually these two gals were Sunday school teachers, they take it upon themselves and they taught the young kids to sit and talk to them about why they shouldn't believe in Santa Claus. Okay? Now, I can see by the looks in your face that these two ladies sometimes make things real interesting for me, because Sunday school would get over, and on Sunday evening my phone would start ringing going, "Pastor, what's going on in Sunday school?" And so then I would have to deal with these things. I had two teachers too that believed that Santa Claus, that having anything to do with Santa Claus was evil, okay, and a sin. Now, I don't know if you've ever encountered anybody with those types of attitudes and beliefs. I'm glad you're shaking your head, yes, because we've got some neighbors south of town here that like to get on those things. And I think it's good for us to take a look at this subject and to know how to handle it. If you look at your sheet, and you don't have to raise your hand, okay? The first one is a poll. As a child, how many of you remember believing in Santa for any period of time? Okay? It was part of my family. Now, I went to school with guys. I mean, I remember my pastor that I had growing up was just dead set against it. He was just dead set against it. we'll get into some of the reasons why later. Number two, and we don't have our children here, but think about this. With your children, how many people have A, allowed their children to believe Santa was real without really influencing them one way or another? B, actively encouraged belief in Santa and everything that goes along with it? C, actively told their children that Santa wasn't real and discouraged all things Santa at Christmas time? D, told their children Santa wasn't real, but allowed Santa to be a part of Christmas in a fun, playful way? And the last one, taught their children about St. Nicholas, the Bishop of Myra. Never heard of that one? Yeah, and you got part of the tradition there. In fact, there's still I know when I was living in Wisconsin for a while, in the Milwaukee area, there were certain families that celebrated St. Nicholas Day, and it came in the early part of December, like around the 5th, someplace around there. We're gonna get to talk about St. Nicholas here, but I want to actually take a look at something that deals with that a little bit. When you think about our traditional picture of Santa Claus, what do you think? And this just a really the question is obvious. Describe Santa Claus and how he looks in our American tradition that we have in our families today. Fat, jolly, long white beard, red stocking cap, the big red jacket and pants. You have, and then you've got the sleigh and the reindeer, all of that. Let's stop back and let's pull back a little bit and look at Santa Claus himself. If you ever get a chance, and it's if you're bored and you're on your computer, just do a Google search sometime of Santa Claus traditions around the world, and it'd be interesting. It's really interesting to see the different depictions of Santa that you find in other nations, other lands, and other cultures. In some cultures, in some of the European cultures, Santa Claus is not a very appealing figure to look at. Scary in a lot of ways. But anyway, to come back to my point, how did we get our traditional depiction of Santa Claus that way? And a lot of people don't know this. It's something very recent in American history. And it comes about from the Coca-Cola Company. A little over 100 years ago, probably in the late 1800s, Coke, in selling its product, came up with that. It was a marketing ploy, and it stuck. Okay? That just seems to go, that picture of Santa seems to stick very well. And so in most other cultures, he's not depicted in the red suit, fat and jolly, probably a little bit more accurately to the tradition of St. Nicholas. Coming back to that just a little bit, then wherein did the reindeer, the sleigh, where did that come in? Actually, you think about some Scandinavian heritage. There was the reindeer. Where do you find reindeer? Usually in Norway, Sweden, up in there. That's some of the Scandinavian influence on the practice. Happened to be, and really that part of it got brought over here. You can't. No, you can't. I took him. You can't have him back.
Did you take these
considering the fact that everybody in this church thinks my office is a storage room. I'm going to pay for that one. Anyway, so you got some Scandinavian influence that influences that as well, and so let's pull it back a little bit more. Again, where the tradition started, and it started with Saint Nicholas, Bishop of Myra, around, and he lived around the year 400. During the time of major persecution in the history of the Christian church by the Roman Empire, there were kids and families that were starving, and were starving under the influence and the oppression of the Roman government. And so this pastor went around leaving food in the put in the houses of people by putting it through in the windows of the homes. And so you can kind of use your imagination a little bit, and you can see how the tradition began to develop a little bit. The tradition of giving and helping in need. And even in our American society today, when you look at how much Christmas has evolved, just even within the last 50, 60, 70 years, in the process of giving. When I think about what my parents said that they got for Christmas, and then things that I got for Christmas, things that kids get for Christmas today. Usually Christmas was a time where kids got the necessities of life: socks, clothes, underwear, things like that, things that were really needed. And a lot of that came because money was tight. But still, it was more about the necessities, things that you need to survive. Over time, we've gotten to where that has changed into where, and hopefully my sister doesn't watch our YouTube channel because we've had interesting, heated discussions about this. I've had a lot, and I don't try to tell my sister what to do. But it's nothing for my sister to bring up, to max out a credit card, buying Christmas presents for her kids. And it's just a healthy balance. But that's not my concern. That's not my family, and I don't have to pay the bills. But it's stuff I think it helps us to see the evolution a little bit there. Anyway. Now we have in today's day and age and over time, you have, maybe we need to ask the question, how did St. Nicholas get to be a part of our Christmas celebrations? Because these are the questions that people have. Well, how do you get from Santa Claus? How does that relate with the manger at Bethlehem in Luke chapter 2 and all of that stuff? Okay. Again, some of this comes from Scandinavian heritage and tradition and so forth. Where actually St. Nicholas Day, which is a holiday in the church calendar, one of the minor church festivals. He was an actual person, and it was something practiced in the first part of December. You can kind of see that in the time of December 25th, and in the first weeks of December, you have and so in Scandinavian tradition, those two kind of got merged. And I'm not going to say for a bad reason, okay? where you have St. Nicholas bringing gifts of necessity to the people of his village. You have God sending his Son to bring the one thing that is necessary to the whole world. Can you see the picture there? And so you had you'd have an opportunity to not only to be talking about God giving to us, and then how that motivates us to give in return. And so you have some beautiful lessons there. Over the course of time, though, especially in American society, Santa Claus helped non-Christians to come in and celebrate a non-religious Christmas. We look at our society today, and how many people today celebrate Christmas that aren't Christians, and it's all about Santa Claus. I'll give you a little illustration here of something. This was something. It was an eye opener for me. Let's put it this way. Years at the mission church I served, one of the things we'd always do during the month of December, we called it a Happy Birthday Jesus thing. And we would advertise it in the paper. We would go and do door hangings in the community, telling parents, take an opportunity to go and do your Christmas shopping. Bring your kids to church from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Do your Christmas shopping, and we'll have a day of Bible lessons, music, and crafts, and gifts and cookies and all of that stuff. And we got, and it was our way to kind of to reach out to families and to make contact with families. One of the things that I noticed when we started doing these things, and we're getting all sorts of kids in that we don't know, I was really amazed by the number of kids going from the age of 3 to 12 that had never heard about Jesus before. And this is in a Midwestern rural community. The first time they heard about Jesus was when we told them about him. They knew about Santa Claus. And it was kind of interesting. A number of kids are going, well, when is Santa Claus going to show up today? But hadn't heard about Jesus. Now, I want to make this clear. While I am not against teaching or fostering the idea of Santa Claus in my home, I can understand the concern of many that it can be. Not only that it can be a distraction, but when we have so many homes in our country where they know about Santa Claus and don't know about Christ, I can see the concern there. And I'm not saying that that's something we shouldn't have a concern about, but we need as God's people to be careful of going farther than what His Word says. Making laws where God says, where God hasn't made it. And so, let's take a look at, let's go on to, at the bottom of the first page and look up Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 to 9. I'll find that's right in the front of your Bible. It should be on page 97. And here, we're going to hear God lay out the responsibilities that God gives parents with respect to their children. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and you shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Okay. Can you describe some of the responsibilities here that God gives to parents? Hey, talk to your kids about God's teaching. You're walking along the road, you're sitting at the dinner table. Talk about that. Okay? And this is one thing, and there might be a few pastors that disagree with me on this. I know a lot of pastors will get into, family devotions, and they are good things, okay? I know that with today's day and age, that even gets to be harder when you got all sorts of the activities at school and with work, trying to get everybody together. And I'm not saying that those aren't things that we shouldn't strive for, but I'm thinking about, I can tell you my family when I was growing up, we didn't do family devotions, but when we sat down, anytime we sat down at the table to eat, God was a topic of conversation. His word was a topic of our conversation, whether how it was being applied applied in our daily lives or how to apply it in what was going on in the meantime. Talking about those things on a regular basis with our kids, where it's a part of our life. That's what's the important thing. Now, notice God gives some pictures here. Bind them around your wrists. I think it's the NIV ties it when it says put them as frontlets for your eyes. It's bind them around your foreheads. The Jews of Jesus' day took these words literally, where they write out the 10 Commandments and parts of Scripture on little pieces of paper, put them in these little boxes, and then with leather straps and wrap them around their wrists, wrap them around their foreheads. They call those things phylacteries. And then they would write them on the doorposts of their house and stuff. And we have a lot of those customs today, don't we? I mean, you just look how many people's homes are like our fellowship hall is here. There's a picture of the Lord's Prayer up there, picture of the Last Supper, pictures of Jesus, other different Bible passages. Those are good things, okay? There's nothing wrong with them. But if we're not talking about them, what's the purpose? It's like having the big decorative family Bible sitting out on the coffee table in the living room, and it's never been cracked open and used. It looks nice, the thought is nice, but it's not put into practice. Talking about these things, I'm going to ask you, ask you some things, and let's bring this back a little bit to the practice of what we teach our kids. I'm going to give you one example here. This is something that just a Christian man. I was reading a book, but I don't know if you're familiar with the man by the name of Ken Ham. He's the one who did he's behind the Creation Museum and the big theme park with the replica of Noah's Ark. He wrote a book called 7 Days, and I was reading it just for learning things about evolution in the Bible, and it's a really interesting book. But to get to my point, he was writing in this, in talking about, he writes, it's a theme in all of his books, about our young people leaving the church in droves. And Ken has some different theories, and I'm not going to necessarily say I agree with all of them. But as he has talked to kids, they've given different reasons. Well, one of the things is, evolution, because they don't see evolution being compatible with the Bible. They see evolution being above that, and the Bible not being scientific. Ham blames a lot of that on the church not stepping up and combating that. I don't think that that's all that's all that he stands on firm footing there. But I can't deny some of that. Then another thing is he'll talk about an example like this. When we have our kids in church and we send them to school, Sunday school, what do we call the lessons? Think about it. I mean, it's just really simple. What do we call the lessons? Bible stories? And once again, I'm not saying that this is the fault, but he says, he asks the question, does this raise the thought in our kids' heads? Because when they hear about stories, what do they think about? Yes. And so it's one of the reasons, actually it's something that I've become more aware of, even as I'm talking with the kids in confirmation class, where this is history. This is actual accounts. These aren't things that are made up, just being clear about that. Sometimes, and to come back to my point here, and I think even the Deuteronomy Bible passage here deals with this a little bit, is what we tell our kids has an impact. Okay? And how we present it to them. Okay? And here's the thing that even like I hear some teachers say, we present the scriptures to them as truth. We present the scriptural truths of Christmas to them as truth. And then when we throw Santa in, and they find out later that he's made up, what goes on in the child's mind? Well, if this was a fairy tale, what about this? And I do think that are some things that we have to be concerned about. Now, again, does something like that, does that rule out having Santa as part of what's Christmas celebration? I don't think so.
I know one time my kids were, because we had the whole Halloween and Santa thing with both of the kids in class or whatever. I can't remember if they were in class or what, but anyway, they kind of got into a discussion about Santa. The one kid said, well, how can he tell everybody, if everybody in the whole world is bad and white? I said, God tells it. And I was just like, oh, all right. It was just like, Santa's cool, but God's still in charge of me. And I was like, it is okay.
Okay.
But I think.
And I'm going to play devil's advocate here, and you can hate me for this. Is keeping track of who's naughty and nice and rewarding on the basis of who's naughty and nice, is that a biblical principle? And if it's not, is that something we want to be reinforcing with our kids? It's just a thought there. And I know it, and then again, some people say, are we putting divine characteristics onto Santa that belong to no one except for God? I'm just saying. And I know there are times, my parents did it sometimes too, where, hey, Santa's coming, you better straighten yourself out. And it was a ploy for them to get me to stop being a little rugrat. Okay? Yet at the same time, I can tell you, when it came to Christmas, and yes, Santa was a part of our Christmas celebration, that wasn't the focal point. Again, and not all of my family practiced it, but we had a church on Christmas Eve. You went to church, then we gathered at my grandmother's, and then we'd go home and have our own celebration. That's when Santa came. And then Christmas morning, you had church, you went. Then we went to my other set of grandparents. But one thing I can tell you with the parents I had, I was constantly told, Santa is not what Christmas is about. God's Son in the manger is what we're celebrating. The gifts and the giving all remind us of God's giving to us. That was part of that talking about these things, throughout the day of while we were walking on the road when we're sitting at the table. These are practical things that are to be a part of our everyday conversation with our children and our families. Once again, I'm not going to condemn a family for having Santa Claus as part of their celebration. I do think there are some things that we should be at least aware of, so that we don't give. And you know what? We don't want to use this as an excuse. We are sinful human beings. We make mistakes. There isn't one parent who has ever existed and who will ever exist that will not give their kids mixed signals about something. Okay? This isn't to burden conscience. But I do think that we need to make an effort to give as few conflicting signals as possible. And so one of the things would be like this. At least explaining to our kids about Santa Claus, the whole thing. And maybe it's a good idea to say, you know what, this is just something that we're doing to celebrate God's giving to us as we give to one another. But Santa Claus never really, there is no such thing as Santa Claus. He's based on a Christian by the name of St. Nicholas, who gave it. We can explain it that way. And you still have the gift giving, you still have the Christmas trees, all of that. Really, the Christmas trees have nothing to do with Santa either. The Christmas tree actually is a Lutheran tradition. Yes, that was something that Luther. It was a German practice in the winter that Luther brought it into the church and used it as an opportunity to teach biblical truth. And so, but once again, being careful of sending mixed messages.
Right inside of this, Pastor, there's a picture where Santa kneeling down in front of the manger.
Yes, yep, I've seen that. And I know some people that are disgusted by that. It's never disgusted me. Yeah. Because I think it's something that brings about. Because once again, as God's people, we want to be careful of. It's so easy to start making laws where Scripture doesn't make any. And with our brothers, with our fellow Christians that are down at Calvary Chapel, I respect their concerns about it. But there's always the tendency of the sinful nature in us, the knee-jerk reaction to take it too far in the other direction.
Like that's how I think, like, you're always like, you're telling me I'm a bad person, you're telling me I worship the devil person, you're telling me, it was just like, he didn't like that,
Well, there's another thing, because it actually isn't the title of the lesson, but I've heard it stated this way: is Santa Claus or Satan's Claus? And I think what that does is really blow it out of proportion. Once again, I think we want to be honest to our kids, especially, and we'll come back and we'll take this up. We'll continue with this next week. But I was just reading something yesterday, and I'm trying to think of it was something that was put on Twitter by Ken Ham or whatever. But anyway, talking about, actually no, this was an article in the Minneapolis newspaper. The Roman Catholic Church just did a study on why they have young people leaving the church in droves. And they were talking about, some of the kids said, well, they came to the conclusion, I don't believe in God. But one of the biggest reasons that Catholic kids gave for leaving the church and not going anywhere was they saw a conflict in message, in the message of the church and with the living of the people. And there was one 18-year-old girl on there that said the reason that she left the church was, she said, and maybe part of it was because she came from a broken home, but she said, Grandma and Grandpa took me and my brothers to church every Sunday. And she said, and I didn't think that was a bad thing. And she said, and then all of a sudden, my grandpa is caught having an affair. And she said, so I saw the disparity in the message that he was bringing to me from the way he was living. And she said, I was done. Now, I don't want to oversimplify this, okay? Because again, the church, and it's not an excuse either, but Jesus tells us that the church is for the sick. It's a hospital for the sick, not a palace for the healthy. So we can't use that as an excuse, but can you see, and especially today's millennials and the later generations, really look strongly at the message that is being brought, and then if people live the message that they're bringing. That is what our young people today, for some reason, really focus on more than any other generation before them. And I do think it's a good thing for us to keep in mind, for us to be aware of. I do think it's something that we need to be aware of. But I don't think that fact alone rules out. We just need to be honest with our kids. And then, if something happens when we sin, let's not ever leave this out. Sin and grace. The only way that relationships are mended and we function together is confession of sin and forgiveness. And that's in every relationship that we have, whether it's people with the Lord, whether it's people with their church, whether it's husbands and wives, whether it's parents and children. It's confession and forgiveness. And that's one thing I think about this young Catholic girl that she's struggling with right now. I'm not excusing what her grandpa did, but where is confession and forgiveness here? And I don't know. We don't have the whole story. But we try to be as honest and transparent as we can. I mean, think of, and this is something I've noticed with especially the kids in my family. And there's a reason Jesus, as a prophet, has no honor among his own family. Because usually the preacher's family sees a side of him that the rest of the world doesn't. That's something that I have to be aware of. I've seen it with my starting out with my young nieces and nephews. They're going, I think we need to even that out, Pastor, and they're right. And I will tell them, you're right, I'm wrong, please forgive me. And if I step out of line in that way, remind me. There's some integrity in that, isn't there? And so being upfront and like that is something we'll take this up next time. All right. So if you got questions, think about them and bring them with. And